Picture this, a sequel to one of the most beloved Zelda games ever made, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. I say this because you, my friend, tell me almost every day how good this game is compared to the other games in the series, which is amazing, and I love it, that this game just beats out a lot of the other games in the series. Well, did you know that Nintendo was legit working on a sequel to Twilight Princess, and then it was canned for a bunch of different reasons, which we're going to talk about in this video. I'm being for real. I'm not lying. This isn't clickbait. Here, let me explain. Hey, what's up? D-Rock here, and welcome to Zelda Theory. Real quick, I just wanted to let you know that I did decide to create a Patreon account in order to try and keep things afloat here at Zelda Theory. So if you want access to a secret podcast exclusively available to my Blue Rupee tier members or higher, and potential voting rights to videos/video topics, if you find value today, be sure to check it out after this video. There's going to be a link in the description if you do decide to check it out. If not, hey, I respect you and your time anyways. You already know. Continue to enjoy the free content here on YouTube. Now, we all know that Twilight Princess was a major success financially as well as in any other way. Now, because of this financial success, after Nintendo realized that Twilight Princess was such a success, they decided to start on a sequel. And then, for many reasons that we're going to talk about in this video, the idea was canned in favor of another game. When The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess launched cross-platform for the Wii and GameCube in 2006, wow, that was such a long time ago, it fulfilled so many wishes of us, the fans, who wanted more of a mature Zelda game. This was, if I remember correctly, this is one of the only games in the Zelda series that is rated teen, so that might put this into perspective for you. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask especially, which I just still don't understand to this day how Majora's Mask is only rated E for everyone. There's so many dark things in that game, but I digress. Those two games have been fairly dark in theme and art and style, while Wind Waker was initially for its cartoonish graphics and vibrant colors. I think you can kind of understand what I'm trying to say here. Wind Waker was kind of a kiddish, more kid vibe. I think that's the word I'm looking for. And then like Twilight Princess and Majora's Mask, they're more on the dark side, if that makes sense. Twilight Princess proved to be a massive success, selling so many more copies than Wind Waker, and proved that a realistic and serious design was the future of Zelda. Now, as we briefly touched on towards the beginning of this video, Twilight Princess was actually so successful that developers quickly began working on a direct sequel of Twilight Princess, intended to be a side story similar to how Majora's Mask relates, like literally to Ocarina of Time. Like there was no time jump or anything. So now the sequel to Twilight Princess was sidelined so that a playtest in a way could be developed for what would eventually turn out to be Link's crossbow training. Miyamoto wanted to make a Zelda game that could utilize the Wii Zapper, a peripheral designed to house the Wii Remote and Nunchuck for playing shooters. Pretty interesting concept. He promised the Twilight Princess development team that if the prototype game bombed in a focus group test, Nintendo would switch gears to the sequel that had already started being designed. The crossbow training was a massive success in playtest though, and Miyamoto's vision became a reality with a Twilight Princess sequel never seeing the light of day. Now I want to put some more emphasis on the development of Link's crossbow training because I think it's pretty cool, and it'll give you some context on this conversation topic as a whole. According to Miyamoto, many of the staff working on the game were upset by the news, which the news is that Miyamoto put guidelines on the game, meaning that it couldn't have an epic story, there couldn't be any long movies, and it had to be made up of stages that took a couple of minutes to finish, nothing longer, right? Now, the staff was upset by this news, and it essentially destroyed everything they had come up with for the game up to that point. Now, however, the prototype was then given to Nintendo of America to test out using prototypes and even makeshift Wii Zappers. Now, according to Nintendo of America, they gathered a group of, quote, diehard Zelda fans and had them test out the prototype. I wish I was one of them diehard Zelda fans that they gathered together. And it was a success. Further work on the new game then commenced, Nintendo of Japan continued to receive feedback from Nintendo of America so that they could further tweak the final product. Miyamoto had already mentioned during the beginning of the creation process that there were certain don'ts, such as no long cutscenes, and we talked about this a little bit before, and levels must be made as short, rapid-fire levels are supposed to long, drawn-out levels. Miyamoto even said in Link's Crossbow training to not make any bosses so that they could just focus on making the game fun. However, due to pressure from the team, he allowed them to add one boss, just one, claiming that making one boss excellent is better than having 3 to focus on, which is what the team originally wanted. The development team struggled with making a shooter game fit in with the Zelda universe, as Link wielding a gun just didn't really feel right. Nevertheless, Miyamoto insisted that it be set in the Zelda universe and suggested a, quote, Terminator-style plot in which Link time warps into our modern world where he finds and begins using an AK-47 to defend Tokyo City and his own kingdom from monsters. This idea was shot down immediately by everybody else on the development team, and it was labeled as, quote, atrocious. In the end, they did decide to give Link a crossbow and to flex what it could do so that it acted more similar to the modern day firearm. The game's original Japanese title was Introduction to Wii Zapper, but this was changed both due to being far too simplistic and to avoid confusion with games like Wii Play, which is called, quote, Your First Step to Wii in Japan. However, the team did not want to call it The Legend of Zelda, quote, subtitle to avoid people making the mistake for a large-scale main series Zelda title. In the end, Link's Crossbow training was decided as sort of a middle ground, which is so bad. Like, how cool would it have been to see a sequel? Like, if you've played Twilight Princess and you remember how it ended, like, they could have done so much more with a sequel to Twilight Princess. And I'm not saying that it can't possibly still happen. I strongly feel that they're going to make a sequel eventually, you know? Now, this is also pretty cool. There was actually a sequel for the crossbow training idea, quote, that was also pitched, hoping to introduce competitive multiplayer and possibly a first-person perspective, which was ultimately rejected by Nintendo. Now, other sequels, such as a follow-up to Wind Waker on the Game Boy Advance and a third Four Swords game on the DS, never got off the ground either. Nintendo just seems to start these projects, and if they get the vibe that it's not going to do well, they just kind of can it. And I'm not particularly upset about that because there's always a way that they can intertwine it again and make it better in the future. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm just saying we could see a Twilight Princess sequel in the near future. Now, the Hyrule of Twilight Princess is large and massive. Now, you can't really compare it to Breath of the Wild. I mean, obviously Breath of the Wild is in its whole other league as far as massive and explorable and all of that stuff. But the setting certainly could have introduced brand new territory for the sequel to Twilight Princess. After all, Majora's Mask kind of did the same thing with the sequel to Ocarina of Time. They made Termina and made it a whole nother land that was kind of off the same story of Ocarina of Time, if that makes sense. And now, in my opinion, Twilight Princess features some of the best dungeons in the series, right up there with Skyward Sword, and introduces very creative items very late in the game, and their use is extremely limited. Like, if you play Twilight Princess, an example here is the spinner, you get it in Arbiter's Grounds, and you really only use it in the dungeon, which is a big complaint of the Zelda community and me as a fan in general. You just really don't use it that much. Like, you use it one time in the dungeon and that's pretty much it in the grand scheme of things. Now, this is another idea that the sequel could have allowed for some late game ideas to be fleshed out or in new ways. Like, it could have jumped on the story of, like the example we just gave, the spinner. We could have used that more in the sequel, if you will. Another example is the double claw shot, which is super awesome because it made me feel like I was Spider-Man, my favorite superhero in the world, which is given to us in the final dungeon before Hyrule Castle. And it was so fun. I mean, it was super cool to just be like Spider-Man, like flinging webs out your hands, you know? And then the only bad thing about it was we had to wait 5 years to get our hands on the item again when the double claw shot appeared in Skyward Sword. Look, in my opinion, it's very unfortunate that the Twilight Princess never came to existence. Considering all the compelling narratives that were between Midna and the Twilight Realm, and just so much of the story that could have been expanded on and put into the sequel. And to me, it's even more disheartening to hear that it never happened because it was dethroned by a shooter spinoff. Like, that's just not what Zelda is. Like, it seems like Nintendo is trying to jump into that FPS market, and like they don't need to go there, if that makes sense. They really don't need to jump into the first-person shooter market at all. So again, I'm super hopeful for a sequel to Twilight Princess in the future. Maybe that's what Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm a theory channel. I can say what I want, right? So what did you think? Did you already know about this? Is this something that you've heard before? Or is this brand new information for you? If that's the case, awesome. Be sure to leave a like on this video and drop a comment below if you found value so I can hear your thoughts on the topic today. As always, continue to be the light, and remember, it's dangerous to go alone. Much peace and love. Click on the video on the screen right now to continue our amazing Zelda conversations. Let's talk soon.